Hi, buddy. I'm back to talk with Den Delimarsky about the future of AI and more specifically, Model Context Protocol, or MCP for short. Now, don't worry, if you don't know what MCP means. We'll cover all of it in detail during our conversation, but the TLDR is that when you're using an AI assistant, you want the data and the responses we get from it to be more tailored to what we're doing currently and also integrate across other tools and services where some of our data and some of the actions we might want to take will live. And MCP is the standard that helps power the communication between all of those various moving pieces. And Den is a core contributor to the MCP standard itself, so no one better than him to walk through it with us right now. And in classic fashion, we're also going to go off-road quite a bit. We're going to talk about generative AI, authenticity, and where all of this is just headed. So it's going to be a fun conversation, so let's dive right in. Well, hi everybody. I'm back with Den. It's going to be a series regular at this point, and all the great knowledge he shares with all of us. And today we're going to be talking more about AI and MCP in particular, something which Den has a great deal of expertise in. So Den, MCP, what is your role in it? How did you get involved in being essentially the go-to person at least in my LinkedIn feed for anything that has to do with MCP?
The go-to person in the LinkedIn feed is not the flex I would want to put behind me, honestly. But I'm Den Delimarsky. I'm one of the core maintainers of MCP. I'm very explicitly saying I'm one of. There's many very talented people that are much smarter than me that are running the show. But basically, I am collaborating with the broader MCP community and helping shape the protocol. I got involved in this project. Man, I want to say, was it May, April, March? It feels like a while ago, but it's just been like less than a year. So earlier this year, I got involved in that, and that my kind of endeavor with MCP started with the fact that the authorization spec was not basically in the shape that maybe was ideal for the average developer. So I ventured to work with the community and kind of rewrite it, and we did. And since then, I just kind of like, hey, this sounds like a fun project. Let's help build it more. And here I am.
So let's take a step back and explain to us all, what is MCP?
What is MCP? Yeah. So if you use the typical kind of outline that Anthropic gives people about MCP, it's USB-C for LLMs. And when I say that can be very abstract. Like, what does that actually mean? Well, here's the deal. When you are using any of the existing LLMs, and let's say you want to apply it to a real scenario, let's say maybe you want to build some application using a design in Figma, or maybe you want to access some code that exists somewhere else in some other repository, or maybe you're building something that needs to analyze your company's data, right? Like you want to predict the sales numbers based on some numbers in a database. How do you do this? Right? Like if you just throw an agent and say like, hey, give me the sales numbers for the past quarter, where's it going to get those numbers? Like it doesn't know anything. Those numbers are not in the training material. Like it's going to hallucinate something probably. So the MCP protocol, and actually it stands for Model Context Protocol, can also be explained as the protocol for providing context to models. You flip the acronym, right? Like that's kind of it. And the gist of it is that it unlocks all the scenarios that I just mentioned where you can now give models access to a lot of these capabilities. Now, your MCP server is responsible for exposing certain things like data sources or actions or design assets in Figma. There's a Figma MCP server, by the way. And your LLM is now capable of invoking specific primitives from a given MCP server, like tools, resources, and then act on those primitives. So if I go to an MCP server and say, this MCP server exposes sales numbers, now my LLM can go in and say, let me go and get the sales numbers before I actually make a decision, or I help you analyze those. And it actually gets the real the sales numbers, and then it works with that information. So it unlocks all these scenarios where the model now has context that is dynamically injected into it with the help of different like MCP primitives, if you will.
So when you describe it, it seems like there's a client and there's a server, host, or a client, kind of a model. Yeah. It seems like we've had for decades many ways of solving the communication between, someone who has the data and someone needs to consume that data. What was the need for a new solution here as opposed to just repurposing an existing one?
Well, the problem with existing ones is that none of them are universally scalable to LLMs. Like, and for the record, like I have this conversation like every week basically, or someone's like, well, can't I use a REST API for this? Like we have APIs, right? But here's the thing: how's the LLM going to know about APIs? Like how are you going to tell it what API to use and how? Right? It also has no way of actually invoking those APIs properly. Are you going to run like curl to go for like every REST call? What about authentication? Like how do you do auth? How do you do like all these things? How do you do things like streaming data back to the LLM from those APIs? So there's a lot of kind of nuance where it's like, yeah, the solutions kind of exist. Like if you like super glue a lot of these things together, then you can kind of get to what MCP is, right? But think about it. Like if you go to Claude and you'd have one implementation, and then you go to OpenAI or Google and they have a different implementation, like none of those things work together. And the MCP is trying to be that bridge that essentially says, look, behind the scenes, you still use those REST APIs. Like we're talking about the example of like sales numbers. Behind the scenes, you might still be talking to some database with some REST API to get your document DB data. But the layer in between the API and what the client actually is asking the LLM is the same universally. And that's the superpower, right? Like the underlying thing can be anything. It can be a REST API, XML API, SOAP, doesn't matter. Like if you're using SOAP, my condolences. But like it's you get the idea that it becomes that essentially translation layer between the LLM and whatever is downstream, which can be an API, can be a container set of apps, like it can be anything.
Gotcha. So it's almost like, the road is the same. It's still like, TCP/IP or, whatever the classic communication method in many ways is. It's that what you're using it for has been augmented with extra details that,
Right.
can be called MCP, because otherwise you need to reinvent so many of the common primitives to make talking to an LLM possible. Send data back to an LLM. And you have LLMs talking to other LLMs in some cases, because not everything is just like one way. It could be like one way, two way, three way in terms of the communication hops and so on. And that's where MCP really comes in.
Right. And it's also worth calling out that the MCP servers themselves can be of two types. They can be hosted, and these are MCP servers that get a URL. Like you're throwing it somewhere in the cloud, and Cloudflare, AWS, Azure, and there are servers that run locally on the box. And those are generally, you might hear the distinction between streamable HTTP servers and STDIO, which STDIO stands for standard input output.
Like classic C++ terminology, or maybe even older, when you had like the SDD command and little brackets you used to type in to like get something out of the console or terminal or whatever.
Yeah. You're essentially piping things through the standard pipes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I mean, the reason why I'm interested in MCP is that, my day job it involves like working on an AI powered dev tool. And that a large part of that is interoperability with other AI services and solutions. And like you mentioned earlier, Figma as an MCP server. If you're a developer or someone building an application, you might want to somehow interact with that Figma capability.
Yeah.
And they're using MCP, and we put MCP as a part of it. And so that's where like my world of MCP really like got really, interesting. And that's how I kind of ran into your content as a part of this. Now, the way we do it today, in some ways is that there's a hard-coded file, it's called MCP.json in our world. I think a lot of tools call it MCP.json as well. And that has like basically a lot of JSON like blobs of like various commands, various endpoints, and things like that. The challenge oftentimes, of course, with that is the day I create it, it's up to date, it's all fine. Then a week later, it may not be up to date anymore. There are probably more tools, there may be more entries and things like that. So discovery of all of these MCP things in a centralized way, is there a solution that's like being done like, kind of like what OpenVSX did, or like what, some marketplaces did, like the Chrome engine and so on? Is there a solution for making MCP management easier?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's now a global index. It's called the MCP Registry. Like legit, there is now a MCP registry. You can go to, actually, like I don't want to misspell the URL, so I'll give you the link, but I believe it's registry.modalcontextprotocol.io. And this is where the registry essentially is the global index of all MCP servers that are out there. Now, caveat that you as a developer on the MCP server still have to list it there. It doesn't magically discover it, but it exists. Like now we have an index, a global index where you can go in and say, okay, let me find all these servers and organizations, IDEs, editors, console apps, like anybody can use this registry. By the way, it's an unprotected endpoint. Like anybody can query it and get the list of servers, right? And if you look at the JSON response from the registry, you'll see that it allows for remote servers, local servers, like all the stuff that we talked about just now is available through it. Like the discoverability is managed through the registry. Now, what's also this unlocks is that a lot of organizations might have policies where we want to make sure that we only gate our employees to a specific set of MCP servers. And the registry allows you to do that because you can just basically ingest the data source and then filter it depending on your work. VS Code is using a registry-like kind of experience, right? Like if you go in and you'll see that you can now install MCP servers. GitHub just launched an MCP registry as well that is also using the initial registry as one of the sources. So you have a lot of these capabilities emerging, but the MCP team is working very, very hard on centralizing this and having this one source of truth. So that's your discoverability engine.
No, I think that's exciting. Like I just did a Google search for like MCP registry, and I landed on the GitHub repository for like MCP registry, and that seems like.
Oh yeah, and it's all open source. I should mention like this is the beauty of the MCP community too is that all of the work that you see is done in the open. Go to the GitHub repo. Like if you're curious about like, oh, what are the folks planning on registry? Go to the GitHub repo. Oh, what are they talking about in terms of like changing things? Go to the Discord. There's conversations on it. Like we're not hiding any of this stuff. It's out there.
No, I think it's actually really exciting because discovery is always a hard part because as with many of these things, the people using a lot of these capabilities are not going to be the most technical of users. They're going to be like, I need to set my calendar entry, or I need to basically, get an image file. And
exactly.
know all the details of it. So there's an abstraction that goes along with this that the LLM needs to understand, and the I guess the implementer of the capability needs to understand as well, because MCP itself is just data in and data out. How it's surfaced in your appropriate UI and all these things probably is a big important part of it.
Yeah, and that's precisely kind of the benefit of the registry is that now all these applications that are being built, whether it's Claude Desktop or whatever's the OpenAI version of Claude Desktop, you don't actually have to worry about, let me teach people to do an NPX install. Your non-technical people, like, does your grandma know what NPX is? No. But she might know if you're like, there's this thing that, connects you to Expedia to book your travel.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's kind of the abstraction here. And once you have the registry, that abstraction becomes immensely powerful because now I don't need to go and find random repositories. I don't need to go and run random, like, let me copy this MCP JSON and paste it in my config. The registry gives you the information. Your client developer, whatever client that might be, it might be a developer app like VS Code, or it might be a client app that your average Joe's using. And it's just going to plug in, use that data, and allow you to install the MCP server. That's it. It's easy. And the ease of use, we're inching to by the way, folks don't realize like MCP is how just young the protocol is. It's like less than a year old. We're going to be a year in like November.
Yeah, no, I mean,
just look at the adoption. Look at the community that was built around it in less than a year. It's insane.
Yeah. And the URL, but I think it's modelcontextprotocol.io.
Modelcontextprotocol.io.
Yep. Took me a little digging around. For some reason, it wasn't the first result in Google at all. Like I had to go to the GitHub documentation, read the blog post, and then the blog had the blog subdomain in front of it. I had to clear the blog part of it out. Then I got the website. It's a beautiful website, by the way. Like
we have some SEO work to do. That's for sure. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but this is a great looking website. Very detailed, really cool. Now, the thing about registries oftentimes, right, is how do you prevent the bad actors from coming in and like adding their own stuff, which maybe on day one is legit, but on day two, it's basically stealing my credentials.
Yeah. So we're in the very early days of a lot of this stuff in terms of the registry and all the security constraints, right? And mainly because the registry right now is just an index. That's all it is. The registry doesn't do security scanning. It doesn't do vulnerability scanning or anything like that. So if you come into the registry and say, I have a server that requires you to run NPX, and then here's my package name, that's what it will do, right? The registry itself is not proactively, for now, doing any of this like security scanning. So like in a way, a lot of these things are delegated to downstream repositories of the content that you're installing, right? So if you're installing an npm based MCP server, the assumption is, well, npm downstream is the one that kind of manages the security of that package, or it can alert when things are wrong. Now, it's fair point if people are, not living under a rock, and you saw the news last week about, or like the last 2 weeks, about npm being in all sorts of hot water with the packages being compromised left and right, and you're an MCP server developer, and you then, because for a lot of those packages, like think about it, think of a threat vector, like for somebody that's an MCP server developer. I'm a developer. A new package gets released for one of my dependencies. I go to my code and be like, oh yeah, sure. Like let me just update the package versions. That's all I did, right? Like all I did is just upgrade the package versions, and I shipped the MCP server. Now anybody that got that MCP server is compromised. I, as a developer, might not even know that I did that. I just updated the versions. Like I didn't embed any custom code, but because there's no practice around kind of securing the supply chain, if you will, then you end up in the situation. So the danger is definitely there.
Yeah, no, but every cool thing that we do starts off where you have good things and you have bad things. That's going for it. Now, one thing I ran into in my my implementation of MCP in Firebase Studio is that in many cases you have many MCP solutions or all these tools that, if you squint a bit, are identical to each other. Like using the payment example, for example, you have PayPal, you have Stripe, you have Google Pay, all these things. How do you get to there might be a world where your registry is pretty comprehensive, and now there are many, many, many solutions for probably the same thing. You have Expedia, you have, I don't know, Google Travel, or Expedia owns many sub brands. So it's hard to know. Like it's Trivago, it's actually part of Expedia, probably.
Sure.
And, all these things. But how can we kind of get to a point where which is the right solution will we recommend for an end user at some point? And if they don't have a preference, is there some kind of a mechanism that the registry is going to provide? Is it going to be based on advertising? Is it going to be like AdSense, like Google Ad style, where like whoever bid the most for something, they'll be the ones to get recommended first, and everyone else will be recommended later? Like, what is the mechanism there?
Look, I can not speak for the future. Like I'm also not, by the way, like caveat, like a big asterisk to whatever I say. I'm not working on the registry.
Okay.
So I'm not making any statements that are basically going to be like, here's how the registry is going to work in the future. Like, I don't know. I would be shocked if there's going to be any kind of sponsorship or ad model. The registry itself is just an index. And especially the MCP registry is basically a vendor company agnostic index. Like this is an index of everything. If somebody, any company, goes in, takes a data and launches another registry, like a visualizer of this, like we're going to launch a web UI on top of it. Oh, and we're going to promote the people that pay us most. Like nothing stops them from doing that. Like, of course they can do that, right? But I would be shocked if this will ever make it to the actual MCP registry, like the official one. Because, and the reality here too is like, if you think about like from a customer solution, like how do you install apps today on your Android or iOS device?
You go to the App Store.
Like, go to the App Store. And the App Store is your index. And imagine that the App Store in this case is powered by an underlying meta index that has no opinion about like who is who. And it's basically like, here's all the things that I know. Here's all the servers that I know.
Gotcha.
And then somebody can build a front end for it and say like, oh, but like we're going to have some fancy styling for these specific things. Like, sure, that's not necessarily.
I think that helps greatly because so you're providing the raw data and it's just unfiltered, unopinionated form. It's up to whoever the consumer is. Some consumers can go to the raw data directly, or some might go to some kind of an intermediary that takes the data and like process it in a way that is optimized for whatever their purpose might be.
Yeah, and for the record, like the terms of usage may change in the future. So right now we're basically looking at the current state of things and how people are using it. But again, I see MCP as a protocol and the infrastructure around it as very much vendor company neutral.
Yeah.
Right. Like anybody can use it. And we see this, right? Like we see all sorts of companies adopting it. And the reason they're adopting it is because it is vendor neutral. Like it doesn't lock you in. Like me using MCP doesn't mean that I can only deploy my MCP servers to Azure. right?
Exactly. It's like those HTTP web servers. Like there's like a billion of them, all optimized for whatever
Right,
runtime or
right,
capability you need. But the
right.
underlying protocol between them, though, that's standardized, that's common. So no one really cares how it's built as long as the data in and out is in a way
Exactly.
that everyone understands it.
Yeah, exactly. Not just HTTP, by the way. And like even local MCP servers, like I can run them on Linux, Mac OS, Windows. Like there's no requirement that you have to be on a specific environment to even be able to use them, which is nice.
Yeah,
Like that's
as long
what we
as, as long
want.
as the protocol is implemented to spec, doesn't matter, in other form.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, so the interesting thing, right? Let's go back to the your example you mentioned earlier. It's like USB-C for LLMs,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, when we talk about USB-C, there was USB 2.0, then USB 1, and then there's like micro USB or mini USB, and
Sure.
all these things. And so, in terms of like MCP, it's an evolving standard essentially. Because
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, authentication now much easier than it was, let's say, like 6-7 months ago when you're
Yeah.
like, okay, do I hand roll my OAuth thing? Like, how does it
Mm-hmm.
verify? Like, what's going on here? Am I inventing my own thing? And, oh, this other thing has its own solution here. How do we, figure this out? Greatly solved. So, kudos to you and the team, for having done a great job here. So thinking about ahead, like what are some of the big things you foresee as like in the protocol that are currently a challenge that you're working on putting a standardized solution for, as opposed to everyone kind of just like kind of putting their own thing in the interim?
Yeah. So I think there's a few, right? Like even around like auth, I don't think it's a solved problem. Like it's just not. Like there is a solution that we have right now, but it's not necessarily universally applicable to everyone. Like there's questions around like, well, how do I build server to server auth? How do I build auth with things like Spiffy or a lot of other standards, right? And it's just right now not baked in any capacity. For that, one of the things that the team is working on is looking at things that we call as like profiles and extensions, and these are essentially built layers on top of the protocol that allow you to customize the MCP servers or clients to whatever environment that you have. So if you're somebody that works in government, you need like a high security MCP server profile, you can imagine that you can snap to that and then have those conventions being applied without you having to snap to the core spec or modifying the core spec itself. Because that's kind of the gist of it. Because you want to keep the spec, the core MCP specification, as lightweight as possible, right? Because you don't want to cram everything, like all these like HIPAA standards for data flows. And I was like, nobody's going to read that. Nobody's going to implement that. And that's fine. But there's
You
avenues
don't
to
want to
extend
take
that.
the Bluetooth path essentially, because I think historically I've read
Yeah.
like Bluetooth is like one of the most complicated things to implement because the spec is like massive, and to
Yeah.
live up to the spec, it requires a lot of things that you need to do right, and which is why most of us, even today, when we're trying to use Bluetooth on some device, it's often hit or miss because very few people can go through the hassle of implementing every single thing in the spec, and
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's basically that. It's like you don't want the spec to become bloated and extremely hard to implement, or even extremely hard to understand why is it acting the way that it does, right? So the spec establishes the baseline. This is your least common denominator. And then on top of this, you can build a lot of other things. And that's kind of the mistake that people also make, is that they think that the spec is the end of it all. It's like, oh, if it's not in the spec, I can't do this. You can. It's just what's going to happen is that you will be constrained to the environments that support whatever you just built, right? People talk about things like, oh, client credentials. I can't use client credentials. You can. It just, if you plug it into an existing MCP client that doesn't support client credentials because it's not in the spec, it's just not going to work. But if you're building your own custom client that does support that, problem solved. You have the capability. You built it. It's there. So to your question of like, what are the big things that are coming? Extensibility. Extensibility, I think, is going to be a massive one. Just the ability to extend the protocol in a way that allows you to enable a lot of the scenarios for enterprises. That's actually a big one too. Because now that the protocol matures, now we're getting to the first year, we see a lot of enterprises adopting it, like a lot of very large companies. And when that happens, they come in with a set of requirements that are specific to their environment, whether it's for security, whether it's for data management, for exfiltration control, and so on and so forth. How does that plug in? And I think a lot of these answers will need to be actually documented and presented to the community so that folks can actually start integrating this. So there's also a bunch of other smaller things and bigger things that you can always see in the repository, right? Like things like statelessness is going to be one thing that's going to be assessed right now. There's folks looking at extending the richness of the UI. There's some also extensibility points. Like that's another area. So there's a lot of things planned. There's a lot of things that are being discussed. Just the repo is a source of truth. Go there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen that, like, because MCP is extensive, I mean, interoperable in a very nice way. A lot of people have extended it in their own interesting ways. You see like complementary offerings and things like that. Do you foresee a world where MCP will encompass all of the various flavors of like implementations and forks you might see in the future? So like MCP 2.0 might, include like bits of like, other protocols that might be extending it and so on. Or do you kind of see a world where, the diverse nature of all these things is great. So MCP will stay core to like its handful of like, core capabilities, and others are okay with like extending it for their own purposes and then, building upon that.
So I think that the beauty of MCP is that it's universality, right? It's that I can take an MCP server and I plug it into Claude Code and it's going to work. I can plug it into GitHub Copilot and it's going to work just as well. So it would be a bit of a sad world where that becomes more like balkanized, where it's like, well, there's an MCP server, but it can only run if you plug it into, I don't know, open code or whatever other like agent, right? Like you can only work with that and nothing else. Like, okay, that's kind of sad. Like I don't want to live in that like in that kind of environment where these MCP servers, like I have to then make a decision like, is it going to work with the platform that I'm using? Right. So I like to think that the way that the community is managing, the way Anthropic is managing, is very much in the direction of like it has to be universal. It has to be the least common denominator with a set of extensions that folks can apply to it. But those extensions are by their nature non-breaking. Like these are extensions that are not going to say like if I take the server and I plug it in somewhere else, all of a sudden it doesn't work.
Yeah. No, I think like, because the reason I ask is like I'm dealing with this challenge right now because we support MCP, and then because I'm a developer tool, there are a lot of things in that world that kind of like have their own flavors of it, like A2A agent protocol, some of the
Yeah.
things there. And I'm like, I squint a bit, I'm like, it does a lot of things that MCP does, but a few things it doesn't, so I can see what's there. Zed, it's another new up and coming code editor that's pretty popular with a subset of people. They have like this agent client protocol. All of them, they love these like 3-letter acronyms, by the way.
ACP.
ACP.
Yep.
And I think like IBM has their own one. I think that's like the agent communication protocol.
I should share with you the link. So Lori Voss, Lori is phenomenal. Shout out Lori. They're just like the best person. Had a talk at MCP Developer Summit earlier this year about the sprawl of protocols because everybody and their mother wants to have their own protocol. And we have so many of them now. But here's the thing too, like of all of those, I'm speaking like a completely non-biased person, like the MCP core contributor, right? It's like, hey, who's this guy going to be advocating for here? But we're like, realistically, like we see huge community adoption behind MCP. Like the community is behind it. It's not a fake thing. It's not that somebody invented it for the sake of their own problem. There's actually a lot of community support and integration, right? So I'm of the opinion that downstream, down the line, a lot of these things will like, Lori kind of set up the stage for this, but basically it's all going to converge. A lot of these pieces that like, oh, this protocol does this better than MCP, are like, if the support from the community is there, a lot of these capabilities are going to slowly emerge and start kind of converging into kind of the MCP world, and then you're going to have MCP in whichever version in the future that has all these capabilities. That's like, I subscribe to Lori's theory on this. Like I think that's true.
I mean, that makes the most sense to me, because right now what I'm seeing is like you have like the Blu-ray camp, you have the HD DVD camp, then you have some people like VHS tapes, and they're like, we're never changing all of this. And right now,
sure.
like at least as someone who's building an MCP client, I'm like, okay, I need to support all of these things because people are going to be implementing things in various cases. And I never understood why, but maybe I do. I'm too naive. But like, a lot of big companies are getting behind their own version of it. I'm like, why? What is in it for you to do your own thing? I suppose it's like using MCP. Yes, Anthropic, built, it's the first, originator of the idea, but it's a community thing. A lot of people are contributing to it. And then, you have like other companies in their own version of it. So I'm trying to figure out like, what is the end game here? Because to me, all I see is like, it's a communications protocol. Like, let's just keep it simple. Let's figure it out. So that's something that I'm trying to like wrestle with as well, because the burden is pretty high on us to maintain all these things. That's like, I'd say MCP is more ahead in terms of like having an idea of registry, having some of these things
Right.
figured out. Others figured it out, but they implement it slightly differently, and we would not support that as well. So as a consumer of it, I'm like, this is painful.
Yeah, and look, this is like, when we're predicting the future, there's only two things that could happen. Either we're going to be right or we're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's very easy to make predictions. So, and in the past, like we've seen during history that XML has been dominating for a long time. And then JSON came along. And then, you started getting like proto buffs for certain things. So things started emerging. Like things are not forever. Technology changes. Right? So right now, a lot of inertia exists behind MCP. And MCP has a lot of the capabilities that developers and consumers clearly need. And those are integrated. And that inertia is super powerful because like once you get this critical mass of the community, once you get the critical mass of company adoption, that support just kind of like snowballs, right? Because now you're like, okay, we're now plugging MCP into this and this and this and this. And then saying like, let's go and adopt a whole new protocol that like two other people are using. Why? Because it has one thing that's better. It's not exactly a compelling reason, right? Because as we know with any, like we're software engineers, you know this. Like think of it of the last time, like let's say you have a product, you've built this complex web app, an API, and you have an authentication and authorization library. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, I know your product has been running very well for the past like however many years, but what if you swap the library to get just a little bit better at this one thing here, like caching? How likely are you as a developer to do that? Right? Like, okay, so I need to rip all this out so I can get slightly better caching. Why? Like that comes at a cost, right? So, and this is, again, not saying this from the perspective of platform lock-in or anything like that. It's more of like the universe, like go back to the idea of like the universality. Because it's adopted by a large swath of the folks in the community, products, different companies, a lot of these improvements also accelerate. So you see these changes coming in and like, okay, now we have to do this capability because this client is requiring it. And now all these clients are enabled for it. And now all these clients can do this thing because MCP does it. And that inertia is good. It helps evolve the project faster, but it also comes with the fact that like you have to have very, very good reasons for something to like supersede a protocol.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of how I think about it. Now, let's go one step beyond it. Like when we look at how all these things are done, one of the big things that MCP is like connecting the some request from a user or some other system to some LLM that's going to process it and return data back. The thing is like, and we touched upon this briefly when you and I chatted, like the last time around. It's like the last 30, 40 years of everything we've been doing is really optimized for a mouse and a keyboard and being able to have that do all these things. What we've seen with AI, of course, is that, the idea of like, I have a problem, I need a solution, that is still there. I still have that problem, I still need a solution. Like I need to set up an invite so we're chatting. I had to send a calendar entry and so on. The way I did today is like I went to my calendaring app, I typed in your name, and then I, found the time, and hit send. There's a world in the future where I'm just going to say, book my entry. I need to meet with Den at 1:00 on September the 18th on Thursday. Take care of it for me. And it knows how to do all of that. So it's kind of like we're still, solving the same problems, but how we solve it though is no longer going to be the same. And one of the big things that's going to make it happen, of course, is MCP, where you're going to have intelligent agents that are going to be kind of doing the orchestration of all these various activities. They will, depending on the task, discover using registry, directly or in another way of like, oh, you use, Google Calendar. And so therefore, we're going to choose a Google Calendar approach. It's going to use the context to be like, for example, you're at Microsoft, I think, probably use Teams and use Outlook. So it's going to be like, oh, in your case, it's going to be using Outlook and Teams. So that level of smarts, I think, is really what's going to be hugely valuable in the future when people are no longer worrying about what tool do I use, where do I click, what time zone. It's all going to be taken care of automatically. And when we think about what are all the things we need at the protocol layer, at the agent layer, the discoverability, the security layer, at the pricing layer, what is the cost of all these things going to be? Is it really going to be free? Is it going to be live? There's a lot of things that needs to be invented. And so when you look at MCP overall, where do you see like the boundaries of what MCP is going to solve end, and where do you see like maybe something that enhances it that needs to be done more universally needs to
Yeah.
begin to enable this new world? Because when you look at the all the keynotes from like Apple with Apple Intelligence or Microsoft with like
Mhm.
their Agent OS and like some of these concepts that you see on like all the various build keynotes and so on, everyone is converging into this world where it's not quite like the movie Her yet,
Yeah.
where you just have a device, which could be what Johnny, Ive, and Sam
Yeah.
Altman are working on right now, where you just talk to it, explain to it, magically things happen. How it happens, you don't really know. It could be booking a trip, and it could be using Expedia behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You don't know that anymore either. It just gets done. That's going to require a whole lot of fundamental constructs to be invented, adapted, and evolved. And so I'm curious to hear your take on it. And it's not necessarily MCP specific. At this point, we're like up leveling it a bit because
Yeah.
I know you like technology and talked about this before. So I figured let me pick your brain since I have you right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I will plug MCP here, like as a start, and I'll say that one of the things that MCP is actually very, very well suited for this world, and the reason why that is the case is because it bakes in a set of primitives that agents can use. Like we use the term agent as this like autonomous entity that goes and does something for you on your behalf, right? Like an agent that is like, go find me the cheapest price for, I don't know, some like a phone charger cord, and then order that and make sure you ship it to some PO box somewhere, right? Like you might have like several agents there that are in the loop. That's like one is like, oh, I'm going to be the deep research pricing agent. I'm going to be the agent that's going to go and compare the wattage of the chargers, whatever. Like this is like a dumb example, but nonetheless, MCP has the primitives for it, right? Like we have the tools, the resources that essentially an agent can go and say, oh, let me use the tool that says query underscore eStore, and it goes and tries to like query this. Okay, now I need to go to this other agent, like convert currency, and let me convert this to your local currency and see which ones of them are cheaper. Let me now look at the reviews and all these, right? Like the primitives are there, and I think we are headed into a world where a lot of these things will become automated, and the paradigm shift is going to be fairly significant because we are going from I have a UI in front of me where I click buttons and select things versus I use natural language to ask for things and then things magically happen, right? And it's like, what was it saying about like the big advance in technology? Like the greatest technology is indistinguishable from magic,
Yeah,
like that, right? And the underlying pieces, it's plumbing. How often do you think about plumbing when you're buying a house? How often do you think about plumbing when you are going to an office building? Like not often. It's like as long as it gets the job done.
Yep.
A lot of these things are plumbing. A lot of these things are basically infrastructure that will support it and having the right primitives. And then what happens to those primitives? Things like securing them, interacting them, chaining them properly to make sure that they can go one after the other and trigger the right actions. Those are kind of implementation details for different clients. And I think, but I think we are speed running in that direction. There's no stopping that train.
No, I agree because the convenience is there. Like no one ever wakes up and says, I want to do something that takes 20 clicks as opposed to just like hitting an icon that says use my microphone. I talk to it something and then like 5 seconds later, it just gets it done. Like I no longer, I'm not thinking about how much work did the poor computer have to do to make it. Like I'm like, I got the job done.
I agree. And I think there's an important caveat here that I want to call out that is going to be very, very important. And that is, how do you build this technology in a way that is actually user-oriented and not oriented for whoever is providing that technology? And the reason for that is very, very simple. It's because if we don't do that, it's going to get abused. And so like, okay, imagine we're talking about the shopping assistant, the shopping agent. Go and find me the best quality, best priced phone charger. Like I, as myself, I can go to, I don't know, Amazon, eBay and start like sort by, like the vendor. Let me look at like the reviews. Let me like, I have some heuristic, right? By which I can do this. If I send it off to an agent and that agent is provided me by Corporation X.
Yeah.
Not talking about X as Twitter. Like this is an anonymous corporation, some unnamed entity.
Yeah. Could be Belkin, could be Anchor, could be any of these companies, right? Like orders.
How do I make sure that it's actually not biased and actually providing me the best choice versus somebody that's like, oh, I'm going to like, every time you ask me for a phone charger, I'll always recommend whoever paid me for ads the most.
Exactly.
Right? Like there's that tension of like, how do you design this technology in a way that is actually solving my problems and not nudging me in direction that these companies want to nudge me in? Because at the end of the day, like I love technology. I love the ability to use it to empower people, but I also want to make sure that it's serving the interests of the user. And that's going to be the hard problem, because for a lot of these things right now, like if you think about like sponsored results and all these things, like how do you sort through that and make sure that it actually provides you the best choice and not the highest bidder choice?
It's such a hassle even today. Like, when I go to Google, for example, I search something in. If I'm not paying close attention, the first 10 links could literally just be sponsored links that happen to be that.
Yeah.
Even with Amazon, I'm like, I'm trying to order
any
something.
store. Any store,
yeah.
like you're like it, literally, like you can go to Amazon. You can even like the thing that annoys me sometimes, like you go and be like, okay, you know what? The best mark of this, reviews, or it was reviews.
Yep.
Because now they're all like bot filled and chat GPT filled and all these like 5-star, 10,000 reviews. It's useless. How do I sift through that as a consumer and saying like, is this real? Like,
yeah, it used to be like you use fakespot.com and like paste the URL in and see what happens.
Yeah.
But now the AI has gotten so good, it's using the same, like whatever AI is used by Fakespot to detect if a review is real or not, the AI that's generating it is using that to kind of like not
exactly
by that.
So it's a cycle. Like the whole concept of, and this honestly, like with the whole like advances in AI, like this kind of worries me a little bit, is that technology has the power to do a lot of good, but it also has the power to do a bunch of dumb stuff. Like I am tired of AI slop, man. I am so like when I post videos sometimes on YouTube, I have like, I'm going to generate a thumbnail, like, and sometimes I want a thumbnail of like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, right? Because it's like, it's kind of funny. Like it just put it like, oh, it's a reaction from Ron. And I go to like DuckDuckGo and I go search for like Ron Swanson PNG, and I get like a list of AI generated slop that is just clearly none of them are real. And I'm like, what is this? You go to Etsy and like, okay, I'm going to find an artist that can actually help draw a card for like my wife's birthday or something, right? Because I'm not artistic myself. I'm learning, but I'm not there yet. I'll find somebody that I can commission some very good art for. And then it's like the whole page is filled with people doing like AI slop stuff. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, right? So when we go into the world of agents, that's what worries me. That's what worries me. Like, how do you make sure that you build something that's actually serving me and not whoever's providing that agent?
I mean, how do we solve that? Like, you need someone incentivized with the sole purpose of serving the user and not some entity. And, I guess if you look at the early example from let's say like, Apple and Microsoft in this case, it's almost as if the operating system vendor itself has to be incentivized to make sure that they provide that neutral territory. And that's also risky in its own way. Let's say you are Apple and you're asking for like a great spreadsheet software. Are you going to recommend Google Sheets? Are you going to send people to your own, like, what is the, I already forgot the name of the Apple's version of it.
Oh yeah, because they have their own, like, there's Keynote. I don't know. See, like, I know Keynote. I don't know any other. Like, there's other apps.
Wow, that's embarrassing. I went to an example, but yeah, and you have like, of course, Excel and all of that. Numbers.
All right, that's an easy name to remember.
I could also be wrong, but like my knowledge of like built-in apps on an OS is at least 10 years old, because I haven't used a built-in app inside an operating system ever. Like I always have my own, like, personally, I go to my app store, install the things I need to do. I don't know what the built-in ones are. It's like, even in that world, it's complicated because, what would you do in that case? Would you recommend people to go to like, oh, Excel is like probably the best, most comprehensive tool, we're going to send you there, or Google Sheets is more free and collaborative, we send you there. Like, it's messy. It's almost like, I don't know the solution, because like every example I can think of where we tried historically to create something, it started off good, but then it got kind of like odd. Even like Wikipedia, you see like so many complaints about like, this topic wasn't discussed because you didn't get enough of whatever A, B, and C. And I'm like, that's complicated.
It's a lot of this, and the thing about technology democratization, and a lot of this stuff becoming accessible, right? Like, because right now running models become super cheap. Like you don't even need ChatGPT. You can run them locally.
Exactly.
Right. So a lot of these capabilities become super cheap and super accessible, which means that the barrier of entry for a lot of folks become less. And it has a huge number of positives in this, right? Like, this is not about gatekeeping. This is not about saying like, we should not distribute these models to anyone that's other than those people that are on the approved list. Like, absolutely not. Like, this is not the solution here. At the same time, the proliferation of, again, like AI slop, I've been triaging issues in a GitHub repo for the past like week that I was working on, and I get like AI slop PRs where people's like, I rewrote this thing and the script to be more efficient. And you look at the like what it is, and they fed it into like Claude Code and with like a basic prompt. It's like, this makes no sense. Like, I don't even know why this is happening, but they're doing it. Like, how do you stop them from, like, you can't, right? It's like saying like, well, let's take away the IDEs from people. So that's kind of silly. Like, you're not going to do that.
No.
But the cat's out of the bag, right? Like, it's the technology's out there, and now we have to kind of deal with the consequences of that.
Yeah, because we always used to like index on the human creativity and the unique value that humans provided as a differentiator between like what could be spam or what could be crap versus like what's actually, good things. But as we're seeing though, in some cases, AI does a really good job mimicking human, things.
Yeah.
There are times when I'm like, that answer that AI generated is far better than what I would have given for this situation. So I'm going to adopt that answer, and modify it very slightly.
Like, and it does have good capabilities, right? Like, to me, like, I use AI to write code myself.
Yeah.
Like, if you've seen some of the projects that I've launched in the past like year, like a lot of them are like, I use AI to proactively help me prototype, code, review things. Like, there's a lot of positives. Like, to be very clear, I'm not one of those people that's like, AI is all bad. It's not. It has a lot of positives and a lot of really, really good things. But at the same time, I think to your point of like the kind of the creativity, man, like if I buy a painting that I want to hang it in my room, I'm not going to buy an AI generated image. I'm just not. I want a real artist. I want somebody that actually drew it. I want somebody, not somebody that spent an hour prompting things. I want somebody that drew it. Like, for that reason, like, I love art books because I see like the artist's process of going from like a sketch to then art, and then me learning to do this, and then seeing how this goes, right? Like, I have these kind of preferences, and it can seem a bit of a dichotomy because at the same time it's like, well, you're using AI here, but here you're saying like you don't like AI. It's like, yeah, people contain multitudes.
It's the story behind the art they're interested in. The art itself is one part of it, but how the art got there is what you're also paying for. So it's not just the output; it's the big picture. Of all of it.
100%, right? And this is kind of the creativity to me. Using AI to boost your creativity, to like, okay, let me ideate. Let me brainstorm some ideas of what this image may look like. And then you sitting down and drawing it is different than me prompting it and then replacing my creativity with it and saying like, oh, here's what the computer gave me. Here's art. Like, that's not art. This is just, it's, some like statistical model put it together. Like, it's not, I don't know.
I feel like people with your point of view will increasingly be more in the minority than not. And the reason I explain is like,
Possibly.
when like Fiverr came out, like, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that, where, you could pay a designer, X amount to like get something done, or you can pay a very small amount and the output, more or less exactly the same. You saw this massive shift where a lot of companies and a lot of individuals went from like, working with like, traditional contracted, educated, like, traditional design companies and individuals to go to like whatever gives them the result very quickly. And I feel like with AI, what we're seeing is a very similar shift. Like, if you look at like advertising budgets for companies and like so many things I see oftentimes, like their commercial was shot using AI, which means it no longer uses the traditional model of like.
And those are the worst commercials, man. Like, have you seen them? They're terrible.
They're terrible today. But
sure,
I look at it as a moment in time problem because just like, the Will Smith spaghetti thing from like a couple of years ago, that was terrible then.
Yeah.
But now you're like, you know what? That looks actually more realistic than not.
Yeah.
So
and
I
like
think
we talked about, like the cat's out of the bag. The technology's out there. The technology is going to get better. And I'm not, for the record, I'm not saying there's no use for it. I just like myself, my own preference, right? It's like I want in my space to be surrounded by art created by humans that has a story to it. And at the same time, I don't mind using AI to go and write code and prototype things and build things because it allows me to move faster. And like, I'm sure people have like diverging opinions on that. And that's fine. Like, it's not,
What if somebody claims that they painted this by hand, but they actually just did it entirely using AI? But because the output is indistinguishable, would you care at that point?
it's like it also depends. Like you kind of, I'll say like you have a degree of trust in the artist or whoever's doing this, right? Because like the same way as today, like if somebody goes and like produces a bunch of code with AI and then says like I wrote this, like yeah, sure, you can claim that. That's fine. But you have to have a degree of trust into somebody that like are they saying what is true? And also like to your question, I guess it's like, does it matter? Like it matters to me on a personal level on the art piece. Right. And I like to think that like I have an eye to distinguish some of these things versus like what's AI generated, what's not. Like I think I can spot it, but you're right. Like in the future, maybe I don't. And then like it's gonna be impossible to tell. And then it's like, what are you gonna do about it? It's like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's no answers here. Like we are in very much uncharted territory.
And the thing is, like, it's not truly uncharted either, because I was listening to this podcast about, like, Michelangelo. My daughter listens to me, Who's Smarted, which is a great podcast,
Yeah.
educational things and so on. And one of the, like, all the famous artists. And one story about Michelangelo was that when he was pretty young, he created a forgery of another sculpture, and he made it look all aged and so on. And he sold it, and he was pretty successful, and he got caught for quite some time.
Yeah.
And he knew the person who bought that sculpture, and like, it's a Michelangelo, and it all works out fine. And it got caught out eventually. But if it never did, this would probably be in the museums and in like all these things for worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'm also wondering like how many things around us that we use today that were like, this was done actually by that person, it's an authentic thing. It's actually not at all. The story is not at all what it was meant to be.
Yeah, and I'd say like it is kind of uncharted mainly because like for a lot of the things that you just described, like you still had to have like an artist make an effort to forge something, right? Like if you're gonna copy Michelangelo, like man, kudos to you, because I could not copy Michelangelo. Like that takes some talent. But if you did that and it's like you're successful, it's like more power to you. Again, at the same time, like I personally, I'm looking at the AI space through the lens of how can I help make this empower others. Right? Like that to me, like we started this conversation with MCP. Like to me, like MCP is one of these components. It's like it helps me empower others to do more with AI than they could today. Right? A lot of the other things that we talked about, things like art, is like it's a preference. Like I'm not saying like shut down the technology and like ban it. Like no, it's like I'm sure like people have different preferences, as with anything in technology. That's all it is.
No, that's very fair. And then the thing that always like I think surprises me about some of this AI work as well is like I feel like when you and I were using computers before the world of AI, every new technology created an explosion of outcomes, explosion of apps, explosion of companies, and things like that. So everything new, like the internet, created like a billion new things that people had never thought about before.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with AI though, and this goes back to the example earlier, like let's say for example, we're gonna basically interact with our operating systems and our devices, and it's going to take care of all these things for me.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of companies and I guess even people whose entire existence is based on the mechanics of how to go from idea to app. Like, if I need to book a trip, I need a browser. I need to go probably to Google or DuckDuckGo or Bing. And then from there, I need to go to a travel site. I have a tab for Trivago, VRBO, and then Expedia, and all these things. In a world where AI takes care of all these things for me, the relevance of like many of those things being like client front end surfaces completely disappears.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
And then eventually what's going to happen is like, if people do like 20 things in a given day and they need 20 tasks, it's not going to be like, I have 20 tasks to do and I'm going to do like 100 different things to do it. It's like, I'm just going to do it in one surface. It could just be the Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude UI, and that's it. And that now creates this world where this technology is compelling, it's brand new, but it creates this consolidation now where instead of seeing this explosion of options and I get to pick and choose, I'm now seeing a limited version of it. That to me is a little scary.
Yeah, I think there's a certain degree of that too, right? But I think that's where the important question to always be asking is, what problem does this actually solve? That's like, you and I are PMs. Like we've gone through the training. We know this. But like anything that you build, anything that you shift in the technology space, always you have to ask, what problem does this actually solve? And I think for a lot of the, like, that's why you have the conversation with people. It's like, oh, you can't vibe code this like app. Like, yes, I absolutely can. Because guess why? I have a problem to solve. And if I can solve this problem in an hour, instead of me spending 17 days learning whatever the latest Next.js framework introduces and like how the React hooks work. And I was like, dude, I just need a dashboard to present my SQLite data. Yeah. Why not? Right? Like I'm solving a problem. Like, and I think this is where a lot of the AI empowerment comes in, is the focus on what problem does it solve? And there's a lot of problems that it solves really well, and there's a lot of problems that it solves really badly. Like, do I want the AI deciding my healthcare plan and how my doctor should treat a specific medical condition? Absolutely not. I want the doctor with expert training to make the decision. Do I want to use AI to go and build me some prototypes and then look at a bunch of numbers and project, like, based on these like stock prices, here are how you should reshuffle your portfolio because there's factual, concrete math behind it? Then yes, I want to use that, right? So there's a bit of that discrepancy, but nonetheless, like you're thinking about like, what problem does it solve? What actually this makes better? And as developers, like I know people sometimes get very attached to code. They're like, oh no, you have to write the code. As with art, there's a process. There's an enjoyment in writing code. And that's fine. It's fine to enjoy it. It's fine to do that. And it's, again, the same as applicable to art. If you want to have a result, it's like, I just need a prototype or I need a photo for something. And you're going to like use AI generation to go produce yourself a photo. Like you solve the problem. Right? Like, yeah. Is it bad? That's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets like tricky on how much value do we provide on some of these things that may, go back to the story of how do you, the process of creating the art as opposed to the art itself. Because I was reading about a study where it was a blind taste test. It was one was like an item, this was like a microwavable from a can stuck in a microwave and put in a plate. The other one was like, created by like a well-known or like well-respected chef. Let's just say it's ravioli. It's a common one. You can, canned form, microwavable form, and then you can also make it, hand roll everything, and do it all that. Most people who participate in a test, they couldn't tell the difference between what was created by hand, artisanal ingredients and processes by the chef versus what was just like opened from a can and stuck in the microwave for like, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you take a step back and you go like, my body wouldn't notice that too much either. Like, why do we do a lot of the things that we do when the output itself really doesn't matter, in what it actually got to that point in?
It's ceremony, right? And for a lot of these things, like there is a degree of value in saying like I said, I appreciate human drawn art instead of AI art because I appreciate that. I appreciate the artists and the talent and the skill they put in. But that's because for me, looking at like me having art in my house is not necessarily like it's a problem I need to solve for myself. It's like, oh, I absolutely have to have this. Like, I'll look at art and I like art of a certain class and I'll look for that. When it comes to code, right? It's like, I have a problem. I want to automate this. Do I care that I spent 15 hours writing this code by hand or 1 hour vibe coding it? Nah, doesn't matter. Right. Agreed. And like it's a Seinfeld skit that you just talked about. Like I said, when the Kramer's like, why? Like, why eat at a restaurant where you can just like put some food in the microwave? Why go to the movie theater when you can just like pop a DVD in your VHS in your player and watch it at home? It's like, yes, it's the experience, it's the process. There's value in that. But also don't forget about the fact that a lot of this is in service of what problem does it solve? And a lot of people have problems that are solved really well by it.
Yeah, and the example I always remembered is like a bit unrelated. Is like when I was very young, I used to read Garfield comics, and there's a great sequence where Garfield, he loves lasagna, of course. Spoiler alert: if you didn't read Garfield and you're like surprised, he loves
hates lasagna. Mondays and loves lasagna.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's one thing like a nightmare scenario where he gets like lasagna in pill form. I think it's like some kind of future-facing thing. He takes it in pill form. He's like, I feel full. This is great, but I miss the taste of lasagna. I miss like how it feels and so on. So that's an example where Garfield would be willing to pay extra for the hassle and all of that of like, doing lasagna in the more traditional way, as opposed to the more easily convenient form of just like popping a version of it in freeze dried pill form, and yet you feel the same way afterwards.
And maybe that's actually a very good kind of description here. Like when we talk about like the difference between like art and code, because that's the topic that I apparently like send us down the rabbit hole of. But like art, there's an emotional connection to it, right? Like there's somebody that painted something that is like, wow, they had a very specific feel to it. I don't know about you, but I don't have an emotional reaction to software. Like to me, it's like software solves a problem. Right? If today we're using Riverside to record this podcast. If tomorrow a software like a SaaS startup comes along and is like, here's a better version to record your podcast that has better experience, dude, I'm switching. I have zero emotional attachment to software. Like I'm of the opinion that nobody should ever be emotionally attached to a software product, because like use what solves your problem. Are you on Windows? Are you on Linux? Are you on macOS? Use whatever solves your problem.
Exactly.
Same way I treat code that I produce with like vibe coding or using like spec-driven development or any of that stuff is like, I solve a problem, and if there's a better solution to solve that problem, I will use that solution.
Yep. But I will say though, a younger version of me many decades ago, I was like a militant Windows fan. Like I would go out of my way on like NeoWin, WinDriver, wherever like there's a community forum and talk about Windows. Anywhere like people talk about like Mac OS, I'd be like, no, Windows is where it's at. And I remember even in college, I was like vocal about how Windows is great, which it's not the popular opinion to hold in colleges. Windows is the thing you want to go for, but. Yeah, it is funny though. Like there's so many phases in like where people's preferences are, because I build, I work on a team that, builds a vibe coding tool. I get a lot of people who email me and are upset that I am allowing people to build software whose output is the same, because that's like the lasagna processing. It's almost the same as what it would be built if someone were to actually, do this manually. I mean, definitely not 100%, that you were limited by the models and so on. But from an end user point of view, it solves my problem for me.
No, precisely. It's precisely that. Because for me, if code is an artifact. Code is my map to get from point A to point B. I use code to get there. And to me, it's like, right, like when we ship products, we both work at a big company. It's like, we know that once products ship, like how many of your customers actually care? Like, well, let me take a look at the code. Let me see how you named your variables. And like, what was that? Did you use tabs or spaces? How did you what kind of comments did you use? Right? Like none of the stuff matters, because they're getting a product that solves a problem. That's the beauty of it. That's code. Code just, right? Like our assembly programmers angry at us that we're using like higher level languages, like, oh, it should be all like assembly or like zeros and ones. That's the only real programmers that do that. Like, no, of course not. You're not going to do that. Same in this generation.
Yeah, it's always been hard for me to figure out like where's the line. What is the exactly, like where's the line really? Because I'm sure you follow like there's a famous Twitter/X account. It's like Die Workwear. It's like
Derek Guy.
Derek Guy, right? Like I have zero interest or knowledge of fashion. Like I just basically have an infinite collection of like solid color T-shirts, and that's it. And yet his content is fascinating, because I'm like, okay, what is this like hand woven? All the I'm like, it's the amount of intricacies and craft that goes into it is fantastic. But I'm like, no, I'll just buy whatever is like there. I know it like violates every single thing he talks about, and like how finely crafted it should be, or what should the collar be made out of. I'm like, I don't do any of that, in terms of it.
And that's where we get to with the idea of personal preferences, right? It's like, if you have a fine taste for clothing, art, like it's great. At the same time, there's going to be people that will wear Uniqlo or Gap or whatever else is like the cheaply made that you can say, man, I can just throw in.
I wear Uniqlo, by the way.
I wear Uniqlo too. Like, I don't care.
Uniqlo is sponsored this podcast. Both of us are on it. So go for it.
Yeah. We're not sponsored by Uniqlo, for the record.
We're not.
But like, it's one of those things. It's like, look, man, like it gets the job done, and it's good enough for what I'm what I'm comfortable with, right? So people, but that doesn't mean that there's no room for specific tastes here. Yeah. And actually, I think on a subject of taste, like we're going to prolong this podcast, but
that's where we like to, that's a little bit of a podcast, like, it can go longer.
I think that's going to be actually the differentiating factor between, like, when people talk about me, like, I had a few conversations the last few weeks where people are like, well, if AI comes along and replaces old programmers and replaces like all the developers, like, what's to set somebody apart in this kind of career hellscape where I can't find a job because of, like, you know what? Taste. Yeah. You still need skills, because to me, it's like, if we look at like programming, like whether it's vibe coding or anything like that, you still need to have taste. Yeah. Like if you look at the iPhone is I'm talking about the original iPhone, like the Steve Jobs iPhone. Steve had a very, at the risk again of bringing up Steve Jobs, and this is the most cliche Silicon Valley thing possible.
You're also wearing a black t-shirt, by the way, so you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to emulate Steve Jobs, but like he had taste. He had a very specific, I want the phone to be this and this way for a very particular reason. Yeah. And I think once we get into the world where anybody can write software, anybody can create a website, anybody can create a SaaS app, taste is going to matter a lot, because then it's like, can you make it actually good? Because like, yeah, anybody can create a WYSIWYG, whatever form, throw stuff together, but like the taste is going to be the differentiating factor. And I still think that there's going to be a lot of value in deep expertise, because people assume that like, oh, just because I can vibe code a web app, that means I can just sling it over the fence and it's now deployed and I'm done. And the reality is not quite that, because it's like, okay, how many of them are going to be properly secured? How many of them are going to have some like critical security vulnerability that's going to exfiltrate all the customer data because somebody vibe coded their auth code? Right? Like there's a lot of these, like you need taste and deep expertise. Like I don't think those things are going away anytime soon.
Do you feel like AI can mimic the taste aspect of things though?
No. I think, and that is because like AI inherently, a lot of the models, they're trained on past data. All it can do is basically regurgitate the past.
But I guess that's where the whole AGI and superintelligence and that part of the conversation is going in, which is like, can we go beyond that?
But I don't think the LLMs are paths to AGI.
Yeah.
Right? Like the LLMs are not the unlock here. The LLMs unlock a lot of things, but I don't think it's AGI. Personal opinion, again, asterisk, this is what Den says. Like, I don't speak for any company or anything else, but like in my view, the path to AGI, like I don't even know what AGI is representing, honestly, at this point. Like what is AGI?
A long time ago in college, I was taking this class, and I read the book Society of Mind, I think by Marvin Minsky, and he was taking this, took an approach where it's kind of like, instead of like trying to make, computers more like human, what are you trying to make humans more like computers to understand a more fundamental level on how can we expand like what we normally do in a way a computer can understand it. And in one of the ideas presented there is that creativity, the way a human does it, it's not really that magical. It is systematic in some ways. You're kind of like drawing, you have some plots on a line, and then you're just extrapolating based on what those paths are to a point in the future. That can be done. It could be a bit of randomization or some kind of like experimentation where you try things out, but that could be an essence of what creativity is. And if we look at a lot of what we're talking about right now, where taste and creativity probably intersect, could there be a world where a lot of what we're doing could just be some A/B experiments where, random things are thrown at the wall, and then one of those things you're like, okay, that seems interesting. Now let me use like contemporary evaluation measures of like, is this good or bad style, for example, and then come up with the answer.
Right, but it's like one of those things to me, it sounds like, the YouTube video where there's like, they had this Italian chef on a show. And I was like, what if you add this thing to your like pasta or whatever? And he's like, well, if my grandma had wheels, she'd be a bicycle, right? It's like,
that's right.
Yeah, if only you figure out this one simple thing of like how this like creativity can be systematized. I actually like, look, we don't even understand our own brain. Like, sure, if you look at the atomic level, it's all just electrical signals to neurons. Right? It's like, if you can replicate that, you can replicate creativity, right? Like, we haven't even figured out our own brain. Like, how are we going to like encode this into an actual systematic way? Like, I don't know. I'm skeptical. I never want to say never, because technology changes at a like astronomical pace. Like you talked about like the Will Smith spaghetti thing. It's like, look, in 2 years, that became a non-issue, right? Like you can now look at videos that are generated like VO, you look at the nano banana stuff that's being created, and you're like, that's pretty freaking like realistic, right?
Yeah.
So for a lot of these things, like never say never, but like I'm skeptical of trying to overly simplify it and say like, oh, if only we crack this super complex thing, then things are going to be really off the rails. And like, let's get there first. Like, I think we're like, I don't see signs yet of us being anywhere near it, right? Because
Yeah, I think it goes with the classic, like, 80-20 kind of a rule thing where, like, 80% of the people in the world, they would not know or care that this was generated by AI, there's taste or not, and so on. Kind of like us, like, with like the Uniqlo clothing that we're wearing.
sure.
It's like, we chose it because it's convenient, not because it has any kind of a specific, thing to it. But there's 20% of the world who do care about some of these things. And I think with AI, what's happening is like that 80% is more easily satisfied by whatever needs to be provided, because I used Nano Banana like a couple of weeks. This is that, as part of my job, but also like, out of curiosity. And, I have an orange cat, has a very poofy tail and all of that. And I had it animating, like, as it was like just like turning the pages on a book. And AI did a really good job, like getting the, the poofiness of the fur. And I'm like, wow, how was that even possible? Like, even like, I just couldn't even like imagine that point, like how much training data went in behind the scenes to get the physics somewhat right. And if I squinted at it and I was like walking by, like, I saw a billboard with that as the thing, I'm like, wow, that's it. That's like, how did the cat do that? It wouldn't even come across my mind. It was entirely AI generated. And that's today. A year from now, who knows where it's going to be?
Yeah.
And I might not just fall apart the 80%, but if I'm at 20% like actually cares about high quality animation and videos and so on, I might actually be like, you know what? That actually meets my bar. The story is not there. The tastefulness of it may not be exactly what I'd want, but as purely looking at the output objectively, it does a job.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, a lot of this is going to come down to personal preferences, right? Yeah. And this is where, again, people contain multitudes. People will have a spectrum of what they enjoy. There's always going to be people that will like, I absolutely hate AI art, and there's people that are like, I have just AI art and nothing else. There's going to be people that will say, I absolutely hate AI coding, and I'm writing my code in Notepad, zeros and ones as is. And that's fine. And there's going to be other people that are going to be vibe code stuff and just ship. And that doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it's all personal preference. It's all what you enjoy, what it empowers you to do, what problems does it solve for you, and how you're solving them, right? And if you have preferences one or the other, like that's fine. It's totally fair to do that. People contain multitudes.
But I think, in this case, though, right, the market will always speak, will make the decision for you at some point. And so I do see a world like, using coding, for example, there will be a point where the code quality is decent or even great that's generated by AI, that there's no market value for someone going and like manually writing code. And I
that
think
is until that code breaks, and then somebody needs to come in and be like, we have no idea what's happening.
Exactly. Like, I think if you separate out, and I think we saw this new paper that was like circulating the rounds, right? It's like writing code becomes trivial, but reviewing code, it becomes even more important. So, I think aggregate, you save time by using AI, but it's not, you go from like 10 hours to 0 hours. It's like 10 hours to like maybe 8 or 7 hours, because now you're spending the time writing the code, reviewing it, and deeply understanding.
I'll say even then, like there is some debate on that, right? And this is kind of like, it's not all black and white. Like, and as with everything with AI, and because again, we're in the like, no matter how you look at this, it's still in a grand scheme of things, the very early stages of the technological advances here. Like we're only like since 2019, so it's like 6 years ish. Like that's not like, that's a lot of time, but not nearly like where we can say like, wow, like for the past 2 decades we've been doing this. So I think the capabilities will, of course, improve, right? But even things like reviewing code, that's a non-zero cost. And also it relies on the fact that there is some degree of determinism in the AI models producing the code that you want, right? Like one of the things that I've seen yesterday when I was actually experimenting with some of the scripting stuff, that the AI produced like a completely wrong script of a seemingly correct prompt. And then I have to go in and be like, okay, no, rewrite this part. Now go rewrite this part. Now go rewrite this part. And sometimes for certain things, not for everything, but you're like, would it be faster if I just wrote it myself? Like, why am I just prompting this to rewrite? I could just write this, man. It's like, I should have spent the hour to do this. So it depends, right? I like to think technology will improve. It will get better. It will get more robust. It will get more systematized and structured. And like my team is working on, like I am working on that. Like that's the stuff that I've been shipping recently with like SpecKit and all of the spec-driven development is an effort to do that. Is an effort to put these guardrails that are grounded in a lot of these experiences that sometimes things can get unpredictable. And we want to make sure that this operationalization of a lot of these processes is there, and you get the superpower of writing a lot of code and you get it steered in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I've been playing with SpecKit, because I'm like, oh, we should add this to like our vibe coding tool. I'm like, I love it, so that you had a hand in making it. That's like even cooler.
It's right, and it's an experiment. Like it's, to be clear, like for a lot of these things like that we're looking at, it's an experiment to see like what works. Because the only way for us to see what works with AI and what doesn't is to actually ship it, get it in front of people, and try to use it for real scenarios. And this is what kind of uncovers a lot of these rough edges with a lot of the AI tools. It's like, oh, it didn't quite follow this instruction here, and it didn't quite follow this, and then it missed this context. What can we do to actually optimize the context? And so, yeah, there's a lot of these nuances that I think will get figured out. Like technology is definitely not staying in place. This is like, no matter how you look at this, and people make conclusions off of LLMs today, it's incorrect to project those conclusions to 5 years from now. Like,
completely agreed. Because the reason why that makes SpecKit was interesting to me is that one thing that we do in my product is like, when you have a prompt as vague as it is, we generate what's called a blueprint, which is basically we create a spec for you, and then you can have an option to edit and make all these modifications. And people do an okay job, but for the most part, they just like, just give me the app. I'm gonna click. I'm just gonna get the app done.
Yeah.
And so when I look at SpecKit, I'm like, this is actually pretty cool, because there is a part of the world, part of the audience that actually cares about making sure this is detailed. And whatever we auto-generate is not specific enough. It is missing a lot of details because there's a balance between like how much do you overwhelm the person versus like how specific you get. And we use like, .md AI rules files, and then like,
of course,
Gemini. I mean, all of these things that we add to it. It's never been perfect, but I'm like, SpecKit is actually a really great solution here, because it does solve it in a very nice way where it brings a little bit of determinism. The way I like to explain it to my team in some ways is like, we're in the middle of this like gigantic pool of water, and we're trying to wrangle it and make sense of it. And it's 3-dimensional. So you put like a barrier here, you put a barrier here, then you got like close a barrier on top and all these things. With AI and all the things we're doing, no one has actually figured out a clean way of building a barrier where there are no leaks,
exactly,
where the water expand and then go into some other form. And so like things like SpecKit, so it's going to be like SpecKit plus AI rules, plus like, the appropriate tools in your MCP.json file that are tuned for exactly what you're doing, because you don't have like 80 different tools that do something similar, because right now LLMs get confused. They don't know what to do, and it gets more confusing when your LLM MCP file gets really large. So I'm like, how do we constrain this very open-ended, vague, hard problem to basically say like, for this thing, clamp all the range of outputs to the one thing that is actually being specified. And if that's going to be SpecKit, it's going to be the overriding bit on this one, then that be the one that we ultimately end up doing.
Yeah, and again, because it's an experiment, like we don't know the answer yet. Like maybe or maybe not. Maybe there's something better. And this is kind of where we're going with it. And I think that's where, for a lot of the pieces that we see now, again, we're in the early days of actually applying this to any serious software engineering. Because software engineering, like people mistake software engineering for writing code, but it's not just writing code.
No.
Writing code is the easy part. You can toss like hundreds and thousands of lines of code, but like maintaining it, evolving it, making sure that it's extensible, making sure that it can easily be perceived, or understood by whoever is actually consuming it. And like you said, like the reviewing part is a hard part. Like, how do you look at the code that the AI generated you a code that does like auth or encryption or something? How do you make sure that it's correct?
Yeah, like a shopping cart, basically.
Or a shopping cart. Like, how do you make sure that it does not leak the credit card numbers when somebody clicks on purchase? Right? Like a lot of these things, like how do you make sure that things like cross-site, like request forgery is handled properly? Like, and this is where I was saying that expertise will still be needed, because somebody needs to know that I need to know what to look for, right? Because the AI will produce you the code. It'll give you the code. It'll give you a lot of code that looks good. But the danger is in the things that you do not know that you don't know.
It's like, this comes up all the time, right? I know we're like way past time here, but
that's fine. It's a good conversation.
It's fine for me. Yeah. The thing is like, back at Microsoft, right? One of the things I always enjoyed doing was like, I don't know if they still have this tool or not, but I always enjoyed like watching the release process. We had like SWI track and SDL track, all these websites where like, fuzz testing was a big part of it. Is there a world where AI creates whatever it creates, but then the output is tested with a certain amount of rigor to actually catch a lot of these kind of things.
No, of course.
So that,
Yeah.
and so even if the app might be created in a really poor way, there might be this massive 1 million line switch statement where it literally goes and encompasses every edge case that could cause some Stack Overflow error or some kind of a mistake. Could that be the solution? The solution is not the code quality itself is better. It's just the duct tape is so comprehensive that it duct taped all of the holes that might be done, and so now you're able to land safely.
I mean, possibly, right? If we look at HackerRank, sorry, not HackerRank, HackerOne is the security bug bounty site.
Yes, that's right.
Right, what's the top contributor today?
I'm looking at it. I do not know actually.
I think it's the last I checked, it was this project called XBow, which I don't know if you heard about it. XBow, it's essentially it's AI. And it claims all these bounties for security vulnerabilities because they use AI to detect those, right?
Wow.
So it's entirely possible in the future you might have some agents, a set of agents that are going to inspect your code and be I'm going to be looking for vulnerabilities in this. I'm going to be also looking for gaps in code extensibility, right? A lot of this is trainable. A lot of this can be systematized. And as we talked before, it's if only we can solve this very hard problem, then we're going to have all this thing happening. It's not an easy problem to solve, but it is solvable. And I think there's a lot of aspirations that are going in that direction. Microsoft launched the SRE agent that can look at the logs and then determines oh, you have a memory leak in this code. Maybe let me go open a GitHub issue, and then you assign the GitHub issue to Copilot. Copilot go fixes that memory leak, deploys it, right? There's this chaining of things that in the software development process, I think is going to be super powerful, and it's going to get better and better and better. And there's a lot of value to it because, man, if I don't have to be on call because this SRE agent can solve this for me and fix the problem and deploy it, and then in the morning I can come in and be oh, looks like a memory leak got fixed last night when I was asleep. That's kind of neat, right? It solved a real problem for me, and it saved me a bunch of time of dealing with it. Now, of course, the caveat there is it hinges on the actual accuracy of the agent that had solved the problem the right way and did not introduce 10 other bugs that now I have to go and scramble and solve. But again, I am optimistic about the direction of technology. I'm optimistic in the direction in which we are building a lot of this agentic workflow.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably the most exciting part of all of these things. And, to what I made earlier, this is not old technology. We're still figuring it out. We're still, learning what works. We're making mistakes along the way and making new mistakes and all of that, which I think, eventually though, it's kind of the path is narrowing to converging on a certain best practices and best solutions. We will get there. Right now, the bouncy ball is bouncing all over the place and so on. But eventually, it's going to be a point where you can pick and choose exactly what you want, and the output will be reasonably high quality, reasonably predictable, where you can actually sleep peacefully at night, knowing that a bug was fixed, it was deployed to production, people saw it, and nobody ended up seeing a bad result from it. We're far away from that today. But I think we will get there.
Yeah. And I think the hard part here is cutting through the noise, because right now, because it's the early days, because it's a lot of the stuff. And again, I use early days with an asterisk because 6 years in some people's eyes is not early days, or right? When was ChatGPT released? Was it 2019? Was it before 2019? I think it was 2019.
I feel like it was much more recently, but maybe
somebody's going to comment on this video and say Den is absolutely wrong. ChatGPT got released. Whenever ChatGPT got released. But anyway.
Well, the snarky person would be it was called IRC, and my friend would reply back with the answer.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So we're in the early days. So the technology will change. Technology will get better. It will get cheaper. And there's a lot of, I think, nuances to it where it's important to be able to also critically look at what's happening and understand what is noise and what is signal. Because I think, honestly, that's the hardest part right now in the AI space is just so much noise. So much noise. And when you go, cutting through that noise and cutting through the hype and actually narrowing it down to very real scenarios, real things, and the reality of the capabilities of the system is very, very important. So I'd for the listeners listening to this, I encourage you to take a critical eye and figure out how to cut through the hype and find realistic scenarios that work, that don't work, and how this is going to work in the future. I think that's a hard problem.
Yeah, and I think, with the universe constantly expanding in AI, we never get to the point where like the dust can settle, the water can settle. We know
Yeah.
where the cracks are, where the pools of water need to be like leveled
Well,
off.
you
It's just
know,
not happening
it
yet.
might settle eventually, right? Like as with the internet, like you brought up the idea of the
I
internet.
feel like we said this like when we talked like 2 years ago. It's like it's gonna settle eventually, and I think even right now, it's like it's still constantly changing to the point where like by the time a best practice is discovered, it's already out of date because there are flaws in it or something new has
Absolutely.
been. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an ever moving target right now, but it eventually will settle. Because
Yes.
we like the old tech, this is technology cycle 101, right? Like the
Yeah.
internet, when the internet, remember the .com boom, right? It's like everything is .com. It's all internet. Everything is on the internet. Put your microwave on the internet. Like everything has to be on the internet. And then at some point you're like, now that you tell somebody it's like, oh, the internet, and they're like, yeah, and
Microwave context protocol.
yeah, micro context protocol. That's what I'm saying. We're full circle to where we started with. Yeah.
And full circle. But then,
Dan,
you and I can talk forever about some of this stuff, and maybe we should like have a follow up at some point in the near future again on
yeah.
this. But yeah, it was great chatting with you. I know we started talking about like MCP, but the thing is that everything we're talking about right here, fundamentally, there needs to be something like MCP that enables all of this. And if we do our jobs right, your case, like actually designing the protocol and working with the team to design the protocol, and in my world of like implementing the solution on top of it that use MCP and so on, it'll be like what you mentioned earlier, like something that done really well. It'll be indistinguishable from magic. And so then, in all these things we talked about, it needs to have all these fundamental pieces in it. So so now we've properly back to a conclusion.
It's an exciting time. I'll put it this way. It's an exciting time.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, thanks again, and we'll catch up again later.
We'll catch up soon.